Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beautiful Days Journeys of Hope, a live stream series featuring refugees telling their stories. My name's Rebecca Garland, and I work at Beautiful Day, a social enterprise that runs a gourmet granola and coffee business to provide job training for refugees. I'm here tonight with special guest Maliss Coletta, who is going to tell us her story of her journey as a refugee from Cambodia. Hi, Maliss.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It is truly, I feel truly honored that you're here tonight. And maybe we can start by, if you can just tell us where you were originally from.
Sure. Before I begin, I like to say hello to a couple of people who are watching. Hi, Sarika. Hi, Devi. So, yes, I was born in Cambodia in a province called Tak Mau during the Khmer Rouge regime. You may know it as the Killing Field. It was a genocide that claimed the lives of a third of the total population from 1975 to 1978.
For those of you who are watching right now and are not sure where Cambodia is, maybe we can show that slide. Okay, there we go. You can see, do you want to tell us something about this, Maliss?
Sure. So Tak Mau is located south of the capital Phnom Penh. And we're landlocked. It's a village pretty much landlocked, but it is located near a river that often flooded.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a pretty challenging time as you were growing up there during the killing fields, but your family did survive and ended up staying there after the war. But how did your family rebuild at that point?
So after the war, my parents started a tire and a tobacco company. Both businesses became successful, and we were pretty well off. My parents not only provided for us, but for many of our extended family.
And I believe there's a photograph from that period. Can we see that photograph, please? Why don't you tell us a little bit about this? Who are these kids?
That was my 5-year-old self. I believe I was around 5, and that was my little brother. And we posed in front for the camera in front of our house in Tak Mau. And as you notice, the house, most houses in Cambodia are built on stilts because of frequent flooding. And on the ground floor, that's where we stay cool in Cambodian climate. It gets very, very hot. So all the cooking's done on the ground floor. And during the mid-afternoon, we would spend our times on the ground floor, open ground floor.
And where did you get this photo?
It was given to me when I returned to Cambodia to visit, and a relative of mine saved it. As you can see, it has been through a lot, and that's the only photo I have of my childhood.
Wow! So you left all your other photographs and everything else behind when you left Cambodia. Is that right?
Yes.
Wow! Wow! Well, then. Why did your parents decide to leave? It looks like you had a home and you had some security after the war.
Although we were considered financially successful, my parents didn't feel our future was secure. After the war, everyone, including my parents, lived with the psychological trauma of another genocide or some kind of political turmoil. that would destroy everything they work for. So, and the country's infrastructure was unstable, and the education system was poor. And for those reasons, my parents decided to leave Cambodia.
Okay. You can take down that photo now, Paula, please. Thanks. So how did your family finally leave?
So one night, I was awoken by my parents, who told me and my four siblings that we had to leave for a trip. I was 6 years old.
A trip.
A
Vacation?
trip.
A trip.
I thought we were going on a vacation. I asked if I could bring something with me, and my mother said no. We all packed in a car and were driven to a village and waited until dusk the next day. And then we hid in a cargo truck that drove us to the Cambodian border. I found out later that our destination was to Thailand, the closest country that offered refuge to people seeking asylum. Because my parents didn't know the underground route to Thailand, an important part of planning the escape was to seek out a coyote.
A coyote? What's a coyote?
A coyote is a word for a person who smuggles people out of one country to another. So this coyote was to take us, with a few other families from the Cambodian border to the Thai border, where we would find a refugee camp. We hid with our coyote until dusk, and then we walked all night long, hiding in rice fields from the border soldiers. I remember being so afraid, so cold and confused, wondering what kind of a family trip was this. I was lucky because I was small. I was carried most of the time by my uncle, who also escaped with us. After walking all night, our coyote told us to rest by a hillside and said he would be right back. When the sun rose and we looked for our coyote, but he was nowhere to be found.
Oh my.
So then we heard threatening voices from the jungle telling us that if we did not do what we were told, we would be killed. The voices were from men who spoke Khmer, and they carried all kinds of weapons. They took all of us to a secluded spot where they stood guard. It was now mid-morning, and it was beginning to get hot. By then, we were all exhausted, hungry, and thirsty. And I noticed my mother had a bag of oranges. I begged her for an orange, but she refused to give me one. She reassured me that the men will let us go soon and we'll find water then. I was so upset and quietly cried to myself because I was so thirsty and couldn't understand why my mother couldn't give me just one orange.
Yeah.
And then the men proceeded to check our body, our clothes, and our belongings for anything valuable. They demanded any jewelry on us and all the money we had. After hours of searching, threatening our lives, they took what they thought were valuable. Then they did let us go. We then were left in an unknown land, more like a jungle, and had to find our own way to Thailand.
So you had really no idea where you were at that point?
No, we were very lucky that they let us go and not harm us in any way. And so, yes, we were lost. We wandered around the jungle, but then we encountered a group of soldiers. We were terrified, not knowing who they were, and thought we either going to be robbed again or captured and brought back to Cambodia. they told us to not be afraid, and that they were working for the United Nations, and they were there to protect people like us. They then brought us to a refugee camp that was located between the Cambodian and Thai border. Once we were there, we started to make camp and waited and planned for the next part of our journey. And that was to seek asylum in Thailand.
To seek asylum in Thailand. Paula, can you show the map just so that our viewers can see where Thailand is in relation to Cambodia? Here we are. So you can see Cambodia is a little bit to the, well, to the east of Thailand, which is in white. And the border of Thailand and Cambodia is quite lengthy. So you knew you were somewhere along there, but you had no idea where. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's, it must have been very, very traumatic. And I know that you have a lot more details that you could share, but in the interest of time, would you be willing to just give us an overview of the rest of your journey?
Yes, sure. So after living in the first refugee camp for about 3 months, we, along with thousands of displaced people, were forced out by firing tanks and bombs while the UN negotiated and pleaded with the Thai government to let us across into Thailand to save our lives. Once we were allowed to cross over, no one knew what to do with the thousands of people. We had to make temporary shelter with tarps and were given a ration of rice and salted fish. At night, when the UN and the other human rights activists leave, the Thai soldiers did whatever they wanted with us. After that, we were either forced to, or had to escape from one refugee camp to another because we didn't have our documents and we lost contact with our sponsor in the US.
Paula, can you show the next photo, please? Tell us what we're seeing here, Maliss.
So this is one of the photos I found on the internet that reminded me of the time of just massive of refugees waiting to be helped.
It must have been just so chaotic with all of those people everywhere, just trying to find some security and shelter.
Right.
Can you see the next photo, Paula?
So this photo reminded me of me. This is not an actual photo of me, but I found this on the internet also. And it struck me because it reminded me as a girl living in these refugee camps. And that was the condition that we were subjected to.
My goodness. Paula, the next photo, please.
This is a photo of how each of the refugee camps are divided or guarded to not allow people to enter with and those without documents. So when we try to be accepted by these camps, we had to sneak in through those barbed wires to seek help.
So in some ways, it was a barrier, but in other ways, it must have made you, in some sense, feel a little more secure because people couldn't necessarily wander in at night. And you had said that was a concern.
Absolutely. I think it is to deter people from entering rather than leaving.
So if you can continue with your story, you left us at basically just wandering from one refugee camp to the next, some of them legal, some not legal, trying to find some place where you could put down roots and feel secure and apply for asylum. What happened next?
So we live in limbo, as these photos showed, houses, shacks with really absolutely nothing. We couldn't go back or forward, but my parents were not ones who just going to give up. So we managed to escape to Bangkok, Thailand, only to be jailed for about 6 months for illegal trespassing. Then were deported back to one of the refugee camps. And then we escaped from that refugee camp with a man and his family who convinced us that our only hope was to go to Singapore, where we would seek asylum.
Can we see the map, Paula? So where is Singapore here in relation? This is a familiar map to our viewers by now, but
Right.
where is Singapore in relation?
It is south of Thailand on that peninsula. If you would follow the Thailand down, there's Phuket, and past Malaysia,
Yeah.
and then right at the bottom is Singapore.
So that's where they convinced you that you had to go. So how
Right.
did you get there? I doubt if you just caught a plane or a bus.
Oh, that would have been nice. Well, we walked hundreds of miles and hitched a train every chance we got from Thailand to Malaysia, and then to get to Singapore. We dressed like the local Muslims, and the man who was with us spoke Malay. We had to swim part of the way with rafts because we didn't have legal documentations to cross the bridges from Malaysia to Singapore. We landed and slept on a crocodile infested shore and didn't know it at the time. We then walked wet from our swim, and some of us were barefoot, um, into the U.S. Embassy, only to be turned over to the Singapore authority, who was furious that we were able to bypass their security and enter their country illegally. Then the adults were put in a maximum security prison, and us, the children, were placed in an orphanage. While we were there, a European couple who often visited the orphanage took an interest in us. And when they learned about our story and the harsh treatment of my parents in prison, they advocated for us to be released. So after about 3 months, the Singapore authority just one day packed us all up in a couple of small Thai fishing boats to be deported back to Thailand.
So after walking and in swimming and enduring crocodile infested swamps and prison, they were going to send you back to where you had come from.
Right. So, yes, somewhere in the sea, close by Malaysia before the Gulf of Thailand, we had to stop on this little fishing boat because of an impending storm. While we waited for the storm to pass, a local Malaysian ship came by, and we managed to plead with them to stop and take us on board to anywhere other than Thailand, because going back to Thailand wasn't an option. And so they actually agreed, and we were brought to a village where we were welcomed and with open arms and were treated kindly for the very first time.
And at
At
this point, how many years had it been?
I believe about maybe 3 years have passed.
Yeah.
Between one refugee camps, being incarcerated in one prison after another. Yes, I believe it's about 3 years or so.
Paula, you can take down this photo now. Thank you. So what happened then?
So at this village, they welcome us, and they said that the Cambodian government, or Cambodia, the country, was their friend. So the Malaysian authority turned us over to the U.S. embassy. But what was different this time was that they cared enough about us to ensure that we would be granted asylum, which we did. And we were legally transported on a huge commercial cargo ship to the Philippines, where we stayed in a refugee camp there for about 4 months, securing our asylum documents and being evaluated to come to the US.
Oh, Maliss, what would have happened if you had been caught and deported back to Cambodia? What would have happened to your family?
Well, my family would be considered a traitor to our country, Cambodia, and there would be many repercussions. We would be punished in some ways by the government, especially because my father was involved in politics. So once my parents decided to leave, they knew we couldn't return. So returning to our home country was not an option.
So it was so fortunate that you were able to get to the Philippines and get legal documentation and end up here in America.
Yes.
So, I just remembered you had shared a while back when you were with the coyote that you were so hungry and thirsty and wanted an orange, and your mom wouldn't give you an orange. So what happened to the oranges? Did you ever find out why your mother wouldn't give you an orange when you were just 6 years old and thirsty and hungry? And yeah.
Right. So this is a story I often tell my 6-year-old twins, sort of the 6-year-old version of the story. And it's their favorite. It's the coyote and the golden oranges. So my mother outsmarted the thieves by hiding gold jewelry and gold nuggets in the oranges, which we then could exchange for any currency during our journey, our escape. She actually did that by hollowing out the oranges and somehow put them back together, whole and seamless to the naked eye.
And you would think that these thieves would be wise to everybody's tricks. But,
absolutely right.
Somehow your mom
and my mother outsmarted the professional thieves who make a living out of doing this to people that cross the borders.
Oh, Maliss, thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight. And for those of you who are viewing, next week at the same time on Wednesday at 5:30, Maliss will be with us again as our special guest and sharing the next phase of her life after she and her family were finally able to come to America. So we do hope that you will tune in. And if you have any questions for Maliss, please feel free to enter those into the chat, into the comments section in Facebook, and she will get back to you. And I also invite you to leave your email if you would like to be added to our newsletter list, so you can receive updates on sales of our products and more information about Beautiful Day and all the latest news. So right before we sign off, I just really want to thank Maliss again for her graciousness and her generosity in sharing her story. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you, Rebecca, for having me.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening.